Can Jamahal Hill beat Glover Teixeira? I mean, I got to tell you, that's not a thought that I've had until right now. Can Jamahal win that fight? I would look at that and I would just think everything is favoring Glover, right? Your preparation into something is so important. And while this is a life's work, boy, that last 2 months leading into it, they sure are an important 2 months. I look at Glover Teixeira, he's getting a double training camp here, right? I mean, he trained for December 10th. Peak, ready to go. I got to see Glover at the MMA awards. I mean, he looked fantastic. Sure, he got his motivation a little bit chopped, then he got a little pep back under his step. Sure, all of those things happened, but he was prepared for a 5-round fight, and this is a guy who weaponizes pace. Most shocking thing about Glover losing to Prohaska was that Glover lost a 5th round at all. Glover Teixeira does not lose 5th rounds. Go find me an example where that's not true. Glover Teixeira just doesn't lose 5th rounds. That's when he comes on. It's when he does some of his finest work. So you got a guy that's in really good shape. That's relevant to know, not to mention he got tipped off. Oh, now not to mention, well, we're going to give him another month, and we're going to send him to the place he wants to fight most in the world. It's a pretty meaningful thing that should favor Glover. But there's a lot of other numbers that don't. Youth alone is a meaningful number. Jamahal Hill's reach alone. Jamahal Hill's a problem. Jamal's a very big problem, and I don't think that you're going to find a whole lot of fights that he has where you go, oh no, this guy is beatable. You're not going to find it in the Paul Craig fight. Like, before you come out and tell me, oh, Chael, you don't think Jamal's beatable, go watch the Paul Craig fight. You're not going to see anything in the Paul Craig fight that you think that you could duplicate. You're not going to see anything in the Paul Craig fight that you would think that Paul himself could even go duplicate. It was a great performance. It was a great position. It was one of these awesome moments. It was for Paul. I mean, Paul was floating around and moving off the small of his back, like Gordon Ryan. It really was. Paul cried, watched him do his, my goodness, a 205-pounder. How are you moving so well? But I've seen other Paul Craig fights, and he doesn't. I mean, it was a good performance, and it was a good position, and it was an awesome moment. I don't think you're going to see any blueprint out of that where you think, oh, here, let me just let Jamal get on top of me in the middle of the octagon. Yeah, that's what I want to do. Let him punch me a few times. Oh, that's great. And I'm going to grab his arm. It's one of those things. What are you going to do to Jamahal Hill to beat him? Well, I think you do have an answer. Before you get too into it, before you go, well, Glover's skills are really good here. I get it. Glover's a champion of the world. Glover's the number one contender. I fully understand this. I'm just sharing with you. Before we bank on the idea that Glover is going to win the 5th round like Glover always does, save one. Before we bank on the idea that championship rounds are going to go to Glover and they're going to favor Glover, before we do that, do we have any evidence that Jamahal Hill fades? Have you seen Jamahal Hill fade? Is that a rumor that you even hear out of the practice room? And it's a true thing with some guys, right? Particularly some power guys. Boom, boom, boom. They're going to stop you or they're not going to win. Do you remember Robbie Lawler? All through his career. I mean, Robbie got to be like 32 years old before he figured this out and changed it. But Robbie was going to stop you. Or he wasn't going to beat you. He's going to bring it right now. He's going to bring a storm. And looking around for the body of his career since the first time he popped on television at 19 years old, not very many guys could survive that storm. But if they did, it looked pretty good for him later in the fight. I just offer that as an example to you where this is a common thing, but I don't know that we've ever seen that from Jamahal Hill. I haven't seen that. Jamal did an interview with Ariel, and it was just this wonderful moment in sport. And Ariel's production team took the interview, and they put a little music to it. They put a little sound to it. And I mean, it was almost not a dry eye type stuff. And he talked about his motivation going into this fight. And he said his motivation is my biggest fear in life. This is Jamal speaking. He said, my biggest fear in life is that I would die someday and never know how good I was. And what Jamal is talking about is opportunity. I would never be given my opportunity. And I'm going to add some words to this. I'm going to change them just a little bit, but this is what Jamahal said. I can live with it either way. Not being the best is okay with me. Being the best is okay with me. My fear was not finding out that someday this all ends and my time and my races ran. And I never had the answer to the question. And that is powerful stuff, at least for me. I felt the same thing. I knew exactly what he's talking about. I would show up to competitions and people tell you, you can't win, and blah, blah, blah. It's like, you don't understand. I know. I know that that's one possibility. But I'll walk out there and deal with whatever shame or embarrassment or whatever that is that you're self-projecting. I will deal with it because that answer will be better than not being sure. And not having the chance to prove if you're right or if a different theory is right. I just got it when Jamahal said it on a personal level. And if that was, because your emotions will change, right? Your emotions will change drastically. You got a lot of pep under your step. This is an opportunity. And there's stuff that we don't know. I mean, there's pay and figures and there's things that happen and they just change when you get elevated to a main event of a pay-per-view. Just the way it goes. So there's things where he would have a little bit of pep in his step. But if he can keep those, if he can grab hold of those emotions and he can keep them, going out and competing with that mindset is very fascinating, right? We're 30 days away. 21 days away from getting on a jet and headed out there. Might not sound like a long time, but things change. They change as soon as you land. They change again when you walk out in that arena and they're all booing you. They change again when you feel as though, right? I mean, I could just keep playing this game. If Jamahal is able to stay pretty steady, and that is really where he's at, where he doesn't think about Glover. See, that's the biggest problem that athletes run into. They think about the outcome or they think about the opponent. When all you want to focus on is the performance. Now, that's easier for me to say than do. But you always want to think about the performance, let the outcome take care of itself. And don't fight the guy. Don't fight the reputation. You got to fight the movements. You got to take his face out of it. Anybody they put in here with me is going to have 2 arms and 2 legs. And they can use any of them under the unified rules. I've got to watch this movement and this mannerism, and I've got to be able to stop it. And I've got to be able to do my attacks, right? When you can start to break it down in those small categories and truly not worry about who the opponent is. Not know the things that I'm saying to be true. Which is that Glover can push hard. That Glover's still going to be there in the 4th round just as hard as he was in the 1st. Are you? Don't get into that stuff. Just get in, just the movements, just the positions. Get that face out of there, get that reputation, just deal with the body. If you can truly do those things, you can perform above your skill set. That would be the mental side that everybody is trying to master. And if Jamahal is truly in that spot of it does not matter to me, in comparison to never getting the chance to find out in the first place, if that is truly where he's at, where he can stay, he can and will perform above his level.